Does max strength rule? We're gonna analyze one of the strongest strength coaches on the planet, and we're gonna start right now. I'm Olympic strength coach Dane Miller, and one of the biggest things that I've seen when I've gone to the Olympics, when I've coached at 10 different world championships, when I've helped program athletes to become state champions, NCAA All-Americans, NCAA champions, to train and compete at the professional level, is that oftentimes the best athletes have a really high ceiling in the realm of absolute strength or in the realm of max strength. So let's just talk about what that would be. If we looked at like a back squat, a front squat, a deadlift, a bench press, a pull-up, those would be the realms of max strength. Something that you can move quickly, but you can also load a large amount of weight onto the bar. And I think that one of the issues here is that in the realm of sports performance, in the realm of the current scenario or the current environment, when we have Instagram and we see these crazy pattern interrupts that disrupt our thought process, that they get catchy, right? We'll see like super unique exercises that might be pretty good, and then we think that they should be the foundation of our entire system. I'm not saying that we shouldn't use them, but oftentimes as athletes, we struggle and we end up seeing it and saying, oh, let's try to actually use these as our basis of our entire system. And I think that's an error that we can make as an athlete or as a coach. And so I think that one of the biggest foundations that we can build upon with athletes that are gonna be stronger, that are gonna be faster, that are gonna be more explosive, is that if we can make the foundation general strength early on and then pile in more explosive movements like a clean or a snatch, then bring in sprints, then bring in plyometrics, and in no particular order, we build upon that. That's typically where we're gonna see the freaks. That's where we're gonna see athletes that are strong and have large amount of impulse or explosiveness and also can run very, very quickly. Now, things get different as we get into like specific niche sports, but in the regard of developing like the best all-around athlete, we're gonna see with this strength coach what I'm talking about. And so we're gonna go right into Will Rattel. And the first thing that he's doing here is gonna be a split clean into a split squat, which is absolutely crazy. I have never used that movement. I sort of wanna make my football guys use this. Then he gets into heavy front squats, snatch grip deadlifts. What's he got on there, like 450? And then some back squat jumps. Now, and if you see how he's changing direction, how he's loading that, and it's, you know, absorbing that energy, and I almost think he's cleaning with like metal plates on there. And so what do we see here? We see someone who's extraordinarily fast, okay? He's very stable, right? He's an athlete that, because he is so strong, he's front squatting 405 here for reps, because he is so strong in the sense of like absolute strength with that front squat, he has a large amount of stability. And we're gonna see, you know, oftentimes, you know, even with this jump, he's moving quickly, he's going through that full range of motion, he's got great elasticity, he can react very fast. We're gonna see some more interesting stuff here. Now we're gonna get into some upper body work. He's gonna test his vertical, he's getting into a clean double, and this looks like it's around 170. Then he's getting into some incline bench, max reps for chin-ups. So he's doing some standard upper body strength work. He's developing that, the chest, the shoulders here just standing, pressing overhead. And so we've got to realize that if we are building with general strength movements and we're increasing load, especially in this case, he was a football player, okay? So he played at North Dakota, and then he played in the NFL, he played in the CFL. As a football player, as even if we had someone who's a wrestler, or even I would argue like ice hockey, and then you get into other rugby, right? Like all of these sports have speed, and then they have an opponent, okay? So you have an opponent that is also applying force into you. So you have to be twitchy with that first step, but then you also have to, when you make contact or when you're pushing into another individual, you have to be able to recruit a large amount of high threshold motor units while you're having that force come back into you. And then at the same time, you have to be able to work through various ranges of motion to apply that force. And that's the big aspect here, is that when you're building a system around general strength, around max strength, and you're also jumping and you're also sprinting, that's when you have a program or a system that's really unstoppable. So then we get into some exercises that are more complex, right? So one of the things that we base our entire system and peak strength around is that we use weightlifting derivatives. We use what we term as technical coordination exercises. These are movements, okay, that you do through essentially full range of motion, that you're gonna do variations. You're gonna make contact, you're gonna have hip extension, you're gonna have high speed movements, you're gonna have stability in the shoulder, you're gonna have co-contractions in the hips, the knees, the shoulders. And now, when you're using these movements, you can sort of look at your exercise selection as though you just open this massive toolbox to help you solve more athletic problems. And when you can solve more athletic problems, the interesting point here is that now, when you're faced with weird movements or weird exercises, you can dominate them. And I think that's one thing I'm gonna bring up right now is that I've actually talked with Will about this, where you might go do, a Joel Seedman type movement. Okay, so I trained like Joel Seedman for a week. I did a single leg glute bridge with bands and stuff and dumbbells. I think I had like 120-pound dumbbells hanging off the end of a bamboo bar and hit like what I would term as like the world record, because Joel had said he thought that was probably the world record. Now, my basis of training, I've never done that style of training. I've always done weightlifting derivatives, exercises, plyometrics, sprints, and heavy lifting and bodybuilding. That's the system. That's the peak strength system. That's a system of garage strength. And that's what we based everything on. And then to go in and do things that are more functional, like a pistol squat, executing something like that very, very simply, executing a, bands or offset movements very, very easily within 1 or 2 reps. The transfer is very clear that when you're using more complex movements at high speeds, more complex movements with high loads, more complex movements across the entire spectrum of ranges of motion, unilateral, bilateral. Now you're gonna see that you're well prepared as an athlete to handle anything. And so these functional exercises, you can just totally dominate. Now the functional gurus or the functional athletes cannot dominate what you're dominating. So the transfer is not there. They might talk about dynamic correspondence, but it's not there when we're looking at going up against an opposing load or an opposing individual. And you can see here, even with Will, so he's going through these Nordics, weighted Nordics, ripping his hamstrings there. Some of the things here, no contact, full snatch, which is great mobility that he's displaying here in his upper back, his hips. Then he's doing a bilateral front squat at 180 down to a box there, which is, this exercise is brutal. And then he's getting into his Zercher pistols. Zercher pistol squats. This should have been the thumbnail that we use on our video. So then we get into some really unique stuff. He does like jumping with weights. I've never spent a ton of time. We might do jumps in place with weights and then drop them and then do bounds. We don't do a ton of that in our system. I don't think it's ineffective. It's just something there that I just want to point out. He's got some bench press doubles, some high incline work, and then some big time rows here. Almost looks like a type of croc row from back in the day. So he's, we're looking at these consecutive jumps, 20s. And again, it's just like, how can we develop the best athletes if they're, and if we're looking at a high school system where we're trying to develop a high school football player who also throws, or a basketball player who's also a sprinter, you're looking at athletes that are playing multiple different sports. So you want to focus on a strength-based system that's going to carry over to many different sports. I'm even thinking about training a swimmer and then somebody who might play baseball. Right? So we need to use exercises that'll transfer to both. And that's where the simple movements and focusing on that foundational aspect comes into play. And that's exactly what we do inside of Peak Strength. So you guys should head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength and get in based off of your specific sport and your specific needs. Now, let's get into some of these lateral jumps. We're looking at a power clean, a push press, a jerk. I think push presses and jerks are one of the best things for creating that explosive upper body and for creating good hip extension and jumping capability, heavy back squats. And he's getting into some really good accessory work. You could look at that as accessory work, bodybuilding style. That could be, powerlifting style accessory work. I like those lateral jumps quite a bit. I think that a lot of people miss those in their training. The old clean and jerk, 140, 170. He's crazy doing it. What's crazy? More front squats. I think that recently too, I've been asked, okay, what do you think the most underrated exercise is? Honestly, I think probably the most underrated exercise in all of strength and conditioning is gonna be the front squat. And the reason I say this is because there's a couple different things. One, it's gonna force that trunk control because you have to hold that posture. If you lean forward, you dump it. Two, it's a little bit easier on the knees than the back squat, okay? Three, I think range of motion, you'll see your ankle mobility improve, your hip mobility will improve, your thoracic extension will improve. Four, it's brutal. You just have to do it, and it's never gonna get easier. And one thing that DJ Shuttleworth, who trains with or coaches with us here at Garage Strength, he always talks about this. He's like, even when he front squatted 230 kilos, it didn't matter. Like, you go and you front squat 150, it's still hard. You front squat 120, it's still hard. Even if when you're front squatting a max close to 500 pounds. You know, Sam Mattis just front squatted 220 for a double. He's got like a 37-inch vertical, and he's like, dude, it just, when you front squat, it's hard. And you get younger kids, you know, kids in 6th, 7th grade to start front squatting, start doing zombie squats, and they toughen up. It's hard to put a pulse on it, let alone you're now looking at the increase in their verts, the increase in their sprints, because they're holding more stable positions. And that's what you're seeing here. Somebody who can split clean and be stable in the catch clearly has trunk control. They clearly have a strong core. They clearly have active glutes. Like, these are things that are really, really hard. Sprints, knee jumps. Some of these knee jumps I really enjoyed. He does one where he gets to a single leg, which is really, really tough. And I actually argue that knee jump to a single leg jump, I believe, is probably one of the best for a start, probably one of the best for training the penetration step with wrestlers. And again, look at the speed, you know, look at the power output, his explosiveness, and his ability to go from different ranges. That's the whole aspect that we need to be focusing on when we're training athletes. So let's check out one more here. We're looking at a hinge on a single leg. This is a movement that's fantastic for sprinters. Then he gets on his Peloton, loves to crush a Peloton. Apparently, I'm gonna rip on Will for that, but dude, I think it's great. You get into some interval-based training, and then you got some Zercher front squats or some Zercher squats. So the big takeaway that I think here is that you have to understand the system, and you have to understand that max strength really is underrated in the realm of performance, as long as we are using high-speed movements with technical coordination, high-speed movements with plyometrics, high-speed movements with locomotion, and then also high-load movements with that general strength. That's what's going to develop the absolute freak athlete. So Will Wertel, probably the strongest strength coach on Instagram, in my opinion. I think there's very few guys as strong or as athletic as him. You can check out Will at will.wertel. We just recently did a podcast with him, so make sure you check out that podcast. And then, of course, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.